Good evening, Don.
Good evening, sir.
Hmm. I wonder where the others are. Let's wait for them. Let me give me 1 minute. Okay, good evening, everyone. It's 6:02, so we can start now. The others can just follow. So I hope all of you are doing well. It's Ash Wednesday, although it's not a holiday. So I hope most of you have gotten your ashes, even virtually. No? Kami ng wife ko will hear mass later no? After this, no? Before dinner. All right, so yeah, let's jump right in. Just let me know if I'm choppy or there's something wrong no, on my side. All right, so module three. Okay, but before that, a few announcements again. A reminder. So deadline for the first assignment is on March 5, 11:59 p.m. You can submit late, but it will get a 5-point deduction per day that it's late. No? If you are having internet connectivity issues, no, I doubt that both, no, because it's a pair assignment anyway. Anyway, in case both are having connectivity issues, you can submit late without deductions, but you should prove to me that it was finalized before the deadline. So if you're affected, submit it in Google Doc or MS Word so that I can see the version history or date modified. It should still be March 5. But the lesson here is don't wait until it's 11:58 or 59 to submit. So I had students last semester na they were late by a few minutes lang. So I was like, don't wait until the last minute, diba? So they got deductions. So same goes for succeeding assignments. So module 3 is up. Some of you have started. No, it's kind of obvious because I've seen some answers no, on the discussion board. So that's good. No, thank you for that. No, if you haven't started it, my suggested pace again, it's a suggested pace. Parang suggested retail price. Yan. That's my guide for you so that you're not late. Um, you don't wait until the end of the semester to finish everything. So hopefully you can cover module 3 by March 19th. It's a bit longer than module 2, definitely. Module 4 will be longer, so plan accordingly. So don't wait until the last week or last 2 weeks of class for that. Module 4, I will post that by next week, no, most probably sooner. Um, I'm just I'm almost done actually. Again, just a reminder, no, I noticed that some are no longer attending the synchronous sessions regularly, that's fine. Attendance is not checked, but please remind your classmates who are not attending. That's okay, but I will hold everyone responsible for things that I've discussed. No? Things that may not be on Canvas, for example, or I did not announce it apart from this session, or the other synchronous sessions. If your classmate will have a question that I've already covered, I will no longer answer that, but tell that person, we've covered that, go to this particular synchronous session. So okay lang. Again, it's not checked. No? Attendance is not checked. But of course, if you attend regularly and you really participate, expect a good grade, really good grade for the online participation part of your grade. That accounts for 20%. Okay. Again, if you have questions, just stop me any point. No. So module three will now get into more of the development theories. No? And module three we will cover in 2 or 3 synchronous sessions. It's longer, definitely. No? Module four will cover in 4 sessions. No? The first part really is just a review, in case you've forgotten. No? A review of important development theories, that you've probably already covered in your Econ 121. But there is a point, that's the reason why I'm I'm I want to do a review is because I want to talk about competitiveness and investment attractiveness. No? And all of the things that you've covered in DevEcon 121 really talk about the importance of investment. So we'll cover that, and also cover the spectrum of political economic frameworks, and I will introduce the concept of social democracy as well. That might be new to many of you. Okay, so we'll do a brief review. Again, this will be a review. I don't plan to to take up a lot of time doing the review because this will serve as a refresher for most of you, or all of you. Okay, so let's start with Rostow. Rostow has these 5 stages of growth. So just very quickly, for Rostow, he characterized this as the path of the usual path of countries, from low growth or low development to high development. So it's linear, it's step by step. You get to the stage and then you do things and then you get to the next stage, etc., etc. So linear siya. So everyone, in the beginning, all societies start with the traditional society. Limited technology, subsistence agriculture, what you grow, what you eat, what you grow, not a lot of commerce, not a lot of movement, so you're stuck in your village, etc. So what happens eventually, people start commercializing agriculture, for example, or earning some wealth, because of trading, some limited trading, so that in a sense can lead you to the next phase, where there's already more commercialization of things, including mining, agriculture, extractives, and other things, and trade, and people start moving on and about, so that's before you take off, the key here really is commercialization of things, of different sectors, agriculture and whatnot. And then because of that, people start earning money. Even the government, earns some revenues through taxes, etc. Then the government is able to afford more infrastructure. So you have more physical infrastructure, and that facilitates trade, because you can connect farms to markets, we can connect ports to industries, to factories, etc., etc., and factories to offices, etc., etc., to sari-sari stores and whatnot. So that keeps on happening, and then the next stage, when there's more economic activity happening, then you now reach a point, no, that there's this deep manufacturing sector. No? A country specializes in manufacturing. No, think factories. Think China in the old 80s. No, garments. Etc. etc. Even food, no, food manufacturing. No? So, and that's the takeoff stage. No, and then eventually you keep investing in manufacturing. It exceeds 10% of national income. You have more modern institutions, no, the state, economic systems, etc., etc. Then it becomes the drive to maturity. No? So where you develop a deeper, wider industrial and commercial base, and eventually mass consumption. The more people have, it's a virtuous cycle. No? The more people have, the more they contribute to society. Then they keep buying things, and then the shops are happy. They keep employing things. So that creates a virtuous effect, no, a cyclic effect, no, where it just keeps on growing, and more disposable income means ability to spend more, no, for unnecessary or wants rather than needs, no. So, and then you're now able to really because of your deep manufacturing sector, you have diverse industries. Now you can now take advantage of trade. So if you were to ask me, sir, what are some of the example countries, no? So China was like this in the beginning, no? Then they're now, because of their manufacturing base, because government facilitated manufacturing, etc. They're now here, no? Same with, let's say, the Western countries like Germany, no? They're now more sophisticated, no? From basic stuff to more high-tech stuff, and then Western Europe is mostly here. No, US, it's here. No, high mass consumption as well. No, a lot of industries, no, specialization, selling outside, etc. They're saying the Philippines is sort of caught in between the preconditions, the pre-takeoff stage, and the takeoff stage. So you may argue, no, that we are here or somewhere in the middle. No? Kasi yes, there's a lot of economic activity, but the manufacturing sector is still not as large as we want it to be. No? So that's Rosto. No? 5 stages. Very important is investment, no, and especially investment in manufacturing, in processing things, no? And investment in infrastructure, because that facilitates trade. So forget the 5 stages, no, but just remember these important ingredients, no? And we'll go back to the elements of what can help countries grow better, no, and develop further. Some criticisms, no, Rosto, of course, all the models that you've studied before and you will study, no, including next week, no, where we have the alternative paradigms naman, no, holistic paradigms. No model is perfect. No? They just try to explain phenomena, but sometimes they lack things. No? So one of the major criticisms of Rosto really is for him it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No? It's very linear. No? This before this. No, but the problem is, see, there are overlapping features. No, so for example, high mass consumption. No, even in poorer countries, no, like the Philippines, you see this. No, so you go to Makati, there's high mass consumption. You go to the fifth, sixth class municipalities, you still have the traditional society. So countries and societies, even municipalities, cities, can have features of these different elements of these different stages. So that's one of the criticisms, no? The major criticism. And agriculture, no, even before, no, in the old days, in the early days of development economics, development theories, no, agriculture was seen as backward, no, but no, it need not be. No, you have the likes of Australia, New Zealand, Netherlands. They're not poor, no, but they are also known for agriculture. So they've specialized in agriculture. It's commercialized. It's heavy on processed agriculture, not just selling basic things. So they've made money out of agriculture. The key here really is, how do you really specialize to make it better? And then we'll study the concept of value addition in module 4. And then, they were accusing Rosto, where did you get, say, 10%, this, that, etc. No? So he didn't have a good explanation. But the point is, I think I like it. I'm not sure where he got the 10% either, but it's good that, it's double digits. It's basically saying, no, you have to invest a lot, no? Invest in manufacturing, invest in things, no? Invest in production, no? Because that will lead to better economic output, and then it will propel you to the latter stages, no? The upper stages. So despite the criticisms, again, two things, no, that Rosto is useful for. No, one is its emphasis on investment and manufacturing. We'll review the concept of we'll review the computation of GDP. No, what is investment? No? We'll review that later in a bit. No? But the point is of Rosto is for a country to develop, no, a lot of emphasis is to be made on infra, because infra itself, no, produces economic activity, no, it creates direct jobs, no, but at the same time, it facilitates trade, no, and commerce and movement. No, movement facilitates commerce. And the second point, no, is investment. And if you want to invest in things, no, durable stuff, it's advised that you emphasize manufacturing. The next model is Harold Domar. Some of you, I don't know if you guys might be too young, no? But this is not Harold and Domar. No? This is Harold and Kumar. No? I've watched their movies. They're really funny. No? So when I was, icebreaker lang to, when I was doing these slides, so parang, sige nga, let's sneak in Harold and Kumar. No? But very funny. Try it out, no? If you haven't watched their movies. No? You might have been too young. No? It came out in the early 2000s. So maybe before you were born. So these are the real Harold and Domar guys. So, two economists. No? For them, taking the Rosto model further, before that, no, before we explain the model, and here, as I told you, no, I will refresh your memories on what investment is. No? So GDP, you should know this by heart, no? Since you are also economics majors. You're both management and economics majors. No? So GDP equals C plus I plus G plus NX. No? If you've forgotten this, please go back to your basic econ. No? Kasi you don't need to study macro econ for this. No? Even basic econ, no, has this basic formula. No? So consumption, both of these, no, C and the G are all about spending, expenditure. No? This is the private spending. G is the government spending. The I is the investment part. And when you think of investment, the mental shortcut I always use is factories, no? Business. No? Kasi investment it's the durable stuff, no? The raw materials, the inventory, the plants, the equipment, rental, real estate, the capital as in K, no? In economic terms. And then you have the net experts. No? Economists will always say, no, na, again, investment is better. An economy that's investment driven is better than consumption driven. In the Philippines, we are more of a consumption driven. No? So it's people going out buying stuff. Kaya nga during the pandemic, our economy really sank because we are consumption driven, and people no longer consumed, no longer really went out, no, except for basic things. So kaya nag-collapse talaga. Investment on the other hand, no, whereas consumption is it's sort of an exhaustive thing, no, where for example, I buy something, a burger, no, food na lang para talagang literally consumption. I buy a burger. I eat the burger and that's it. It ends there, no. But investment, no, I spend on a factory, I spend on inventory, I spend on raw materials. It doesn't end there, no. I can produce something. With that, I produce things, I sell things, I get profit, I can employ more, I can blow it back to the business, and repeat, no? So, gonna. So, flow it back, etc. So, investment is more, it can grow, no? It's more sustainable, no? And it has a virtuous cyclic effect, no? If you think about it. Consumption kasi, especially for food, for example, or an experience, no? Kasi goods and services naman, once you consume it, that's it. Di ba? So, mas maganda yung investment. So, that's a review of macro stuff yet. So, Harold and Dumar, before we jump into the model and before we review it, there are two basic economic concepts also where S equals I, and then you have the three main factors of production. So S equals I, no? S stands for savings, I stands for investment. In economic parlance, no, they usually equate. Of course, if you think about it, it's not necessarily the same. No? S is not necessarily equals to I, but economists like to equate it with each other because, diba, it's two sides to one coin. No? If you have money, let's say the analogy is a household. No? The money that so your mom or your dad, no, they buy stuff. No, what they don't spend becomes savings. Diba? The flip side of consumption is savings. And if you're saving money, you have this excess money lying around. No, as an aggregate, the country can use what you're not consuming, you can flow it into something more productive. Diba? Kaya nga, savings equals investment. No? For your, if you may remember that in your basic economics class. And then the three factors of production: land, labor, and capital. Capital here is the K, no? That's not money, no? Capital as in durable goods. No? Again, think machineries, think factories, etc., etc. Tractors, no, for agriculture. Okay. So with that, let's revisit Harold and Dumar. Okay. And I'll ask you later, no, for some criticisms, no, or weaknesses of Harold and Dumar. Right. So for Harold and Dumar, I mean, this is a simplified version of their formula. No? They had like a long formula, no, before they derived this simple thing here. No? So for them, no, again, we're all after rapid economic growth, no. So we want economic growth to grow fast, no. The economy to grow fast. No? So they're saying the two major determinants of economic growth is the level of savings, because again, no, S equals I, no, that can be used for investment, and then divided by capital output ratio. No? How efficient your capital is, no? How efficient your machines are, your durable things are, no? In producing stuff. No? So K, formally speaking, is the amount of capital needed to increase output, no? To have an additional increase in output, the marginal product. Again, going back to your economics courses, the term marginal is used frequently. No? It just means an incremental or an additional output. So K is the how efficient your machine is, the amount of capital you need to increase output, an additional output. So example lang to illustrate things. So if an equipment, no, let's say factory setting, costs 100 million, no? And that increases output by an additional 20 million, no? The capital output ratio is 5. Simple formula, di ba? Capital output ratio, di ba? Is 5. So, capital, how much is it divided by what it produces? And then if the level of savings is 10%, so 10% divided by 5, you'd expect GDP to grow by 2%. So simple, di ba? Kasi nga, savings, you'd expect will can be transformed into investment, and simple algebra, if you increase one of these factors, GDP will tend to go up. But Harold and Dumar is saying, no, the quality of your investment is determined by how efficient you can churn out outputs. But let's try to play around with the model. So let's go back to your previous example. So 2% because S divided by K, no? The savings is at 10%. Again, the 100 million peso worth of equipment produces marginal output of 20 million, no? Additional output of 20 million. Or capital output ratio equals 5. So what if instead of 10%, the savings rate is increased to 15%? Then, and without changing this, no? Then GDP, GNP growth improves. Diba? Just by improving savings, by consuming less, flowing into investment, and keeping other things constant, like the efficiency of capital or the durable goods. Yung isa naman, again, there are two factors here, no? The numerator and denominator. If you increase the two ways, no? Mathematically, if you want to grow a number, you increase the numerator or you reduce the denominator. Ito naman, let's play around with the denominator, which is the productivity of capital. No? So again, going back, let's go back to the 10% savings. But what if a more advanced technology is introduced, no? And instead of that similarly expensive equipment of 100 million, what if that is now able to produce 50 million, an additional 50 million output instead of the incremental 20 million output? So what will happen is your capital output ratio is no longer 5. Diba? It now becomes 2. Kasi 100 million divided by 50 million, no? More effective, no? Mas efficient yung capital mo, then you would expect better growth. No? Kasi mas productive, mas efficient. It can churn out things faster, better, no? For the same amount. So for example, if you improve both, no? Increase the savings, introduce more advanced technology, all the more that it will increase. What are the weaknesses of Harold and Dumar? Go ahead, Don.
Hello, sir. I think one criticism I'm thinking of right now is that it's possible that not all of the investments or not all of the resources are used. How does that, if that happens, how does that factor in the equation?
You mean not all of the savings are translated into investment?
Into outputs po, sir.
Yeah, that's correct. No? That's one criticism. Again, economic courses always assumes that it will be used for investment, but you're right, need not be. Kasi for example, households can just, kasi here's I don't know, the theory of macroeconomics is, in a nutshell, no, what households don't consume, no, they maybe park it in the bank, no, and that's what banks use to lend to, let's say, businesses, no, for production. Pero what if households just don't do that, or what if businesses don't translate that available money or resources? So that's one criticism. No, it need not be. No, other criticisms. That's a possible criticism, but in the macro sense, no, if there is additional capital, then more often than not, it will be used. But you're right, no, not everything will be used. Anika, go ahead.
Sir, I was just thinking kasi like, as you mentioned a while ago, the Philippines is primarily a consumption-based economy. So that being said, like as a developing country with that kind of economy, isn't it hard to save din po? Parang if we're applying the Harold Demar framework, because yun nga, if our income is lower compared to developed countries, even in the level of households, parang the extra income gained is usually just consumed din naman at the end of the day rather than saved.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. And so, and I'll get to that. It's actually a nice slide in the next slide. Sige, other ideas, other thoughts in terms of weaknesses, criticisms. Sige, let's move. Yeah, so what Anika was saying, no, I sorry, I messed up the sequencing of the slide. So Anika is right. No, I thought I had a slide for that. No, the major criticism of before this, one of the major criticisms, no, Don is also right, no, in terms of not necessarily converting it into investment or productive use. No, the other major criticism of Harold and Domar is you keep sort of advocating that countries consume less and invest more. No? But in reality, again, let's take the analogy of a household. No, poorer countries are find it more difficult to save and invest. No, kasi for example, if you're again the analogy is a poor family. If you're a poor family, your one parent is the breadwinner and that parent is just earning minimum wage. No, don't tell me, no, don't tell that person, oh, you save more. Hindi nga, because the family is poor, uh, majority of what they earn, no, they consume. So how the hell are they gonna save? So, yun ang isang criticism. No? Parang, it's easier said than done. For poorer countries, no, savings that can be brought back to investment, that's easier said than done. Another major criticism is Harold and Domar only focus on the objects, no, the means of production, no? The objects, no. But he actually they forgot the other important thing, like who operates the machineries. No, they forgot about labor productivity, the people. Kasi parang they sort of assume na lang, no, everyone's skill level, no, is the same, equal. But you know better than that, di ba? The skills, no, the productivity of a person who did not even finish high school is different from the skills and competencies of someone who's had further training in TESDA, in did a PhD, etc., etc. So magkaiba. So the efficiency and productivity of land, labor, and capital, no, is not just determined by the capital. Kaya nga there are three major factors of production. There's the labor part. No? So he forgot about that. No? So if you have advanced technology, but people don't know how to use it, they didn't finish school, no, majority didn't, useless. So it goes both ways. It has to improve at the same rate in a sense. So Harold and Domar did not cover labor productivity because there are three factors of production: no? Land, labor, and capital. No? I don't know if you've come across this term already, no, but it's a good measure of productivity, no, the average productivity of the workforce, plus combined with how they interact with machineries, no? The other factors of production. So obviously, research has shown that more productive capital and, no, they forgot the end, no, and labor or individuals have significantly positive effects on the economy. That's why you can read more. No, I provided links on Canvas. No, that's why there's this concept of human capital. No? It's not just capital in terms of objects, no, but it's also people. No, it's the knowledge and skills that a person will need so that they can do something. So the more you're trained, the more you've undergone skills training, studies, the more you are productive. That's why human capital, it becomes, no, in practice, it has become synonymous with health and nutrition and education. The more well-nourished people are or kids are, the better educated they are, the more, and you see this really, you see this in Korea. In my previous classes, I had a discussion about in Korea. What Korea did, no, and just following the Harold and Domar and Rosto was they opened up their economy, a lot of investment, they built infrastructure investment, but at the same time, they focus on quality education. No? So I had the privilege of studying abroad. Uh, Magagaling, no? When my classmates who are Indians, Chinese, Koreans, ang gagaling sa math, etc., etc. Very smart because their government made sure that it's not just the objects, no, but investing also in the human capital, the human stock, the labor productivity, the person. Again, it goes back to your capabilities approach, di ba? Yun yung gusto natin. Remember, it's giving people the opportunity so that they themselves can earn more, do more, be more productive. That contributes to the general macro economy. So again, the lesson here is focusing on investment. So both Harold Demar and Roston, investment-led growth is preferred. But of course, there are other, no, and we will learn this later on when we talk about competitiveness. You focus on investment and then you focus on other elements that interact and attract investment. It, I guess, as I told you, no, investment-led growth is preferred because apart from employing more people and generating better, greater economic activity, it creates a virtuous growth cycle. No? You can produce, you earn money, you get profit, you expand your production, you employ more people, etc., etc. So, diba? It's not an exhaustive contributor. Unlike consumption, no? It's good also because, of course, if you eat something or buy something, it means someone else made profit out of it. Pero if it's just consuming food or going to the movies, that's it. Wala na. Diba? But investment, if you invest on something, it can keep growing. Go back, growing, and repeat. Diba? And diversifying investment also, no? This was done by, let's say, China, India to a certain extent, Korea, the Western European countries, no? US, obviously. And of course, focus on people, human capital. It's not in Harold and Domar, no? Again, that's the weakness, no? But it's also implied in Rosto, no? um, sort of. No? And then one more weakness of Harold and Domar, no? They're tying investment to savings, no? But they forgot that one source of investment, no? And that's why a lot of poorer countries are trying to attract foreign investment. No? Another source of investment, if the country itself, no, doesn't have the resources for investment, is foreign. Diba? So, diba? For example, again, the analogy sa household, I have a business, no? If I no longer have excess money to invest, no, there can be outsiders that can invest. So they forgot about that. So may mga weaknesses. But again, the emphasis on investment is good. Investment, manufacturing, and infrastructure. And we'll learn more later, no, when we talk about competitiveness. Another thing I want to review is the classical approach. No? And I'm also including this in our lecture and in your Canvas course because I want to present to you the spectrum of review, the spectrum of approaches, and maybe I will introduce to you what I think is the most optimal political economic framework, no? The governance framework. No? So neoclassical first, no? Two extremes, no? The Marxist one later, and then the neoclassical one. Neoclassical, you know this by heart, no? One thing I will never forget in my basic course before, no, was Adam Smith. Kasi the invisible hand theory, di ba? Parang wow, ano ba yan? Di ba? It was a cool concept at that time, no? Parang the basic premise of the neoclassical thinking is trust the market, no? The market will provide everything that people need. No? So it will eventually advance the interests of society. It will solve inequality. So trust the private sector, government, stay away. So this is an extreme form. No? Parang very minimal government interference, bahala na yung private sector. But the problem is it really optimal? No, the problem is the theory is, okay yan. Private sector will provide this, no? People will have jobs because the private sector will need them, etc., etc. And then private sector will help contribute to government, infrastructure, etc. But sometimes it becomes this. No. If it's unbridled, there's abuses, and then government doesn't provide the right incentives for the private sector to actually be in the interest of society. It could happen this way. So the reality is somewhere in between. The private sector, of course, produces majority of what we need, but there are also some inequalities. If government, does not it's not effective. And you know this concept already. There are market failures and externality. That's why it cannot be just laissez-faire. Cannot be just let the market determine what will happen, the buyers and sellers. Kasi there are externalities like pollution, abuses, environmental damages. Majority, I think, I believe, or at least many or most private companies are mean well, or at the very least they try to not do any harm. But some are evil, and then they don't care. They pollute. They don't care about the environment. They destroy the environment. Again, another market failure is sometimes private sector cannot provide it. So, for example, why broadband internet in the far-flung areas, or electricity in the mga liblib, because it's government, kasi walang pera for the private sector to actually go there. So military spending, for example, it's government who does that. So there are some things that are inherently governmental in terms of function. And sometimes the business sector lacks the supply. Diba? Again, the market is supply and demand. Sometimes the demand is greater than supply, and sometimes government needs to intervene. And the last is abuse. Sometimes the big boys can actually what do you call this? Abuse their market power, yung mga monopolies. Kaya nga they were complaining, Globe and Smart, poor service, That's why we wanted more competition, kasi nga the two oligopolies were just milking it with poor service. So yun. So we cannot just leave it to the market. We need some sort of government interference. But to what extent, we'll cover that in a while. Again, so yes, there are some problems with the neoclassical things. We're not saying that let's revert back. No more capitalism. No, in many cases, the private sector again provides good things. They are more innovative. They have more expertise, cutting edge technology than government. So, for example, vaccines. Of course, except for the Chinese and the Russian vaccines, Pfizer, BioNTech, before Pfizer bought BioNTech, BioNTech and Moderna, without their expertise, we wouldn't have global vaccines. AstraZeneca, that's a private sector. But what happened before, and this is a good example again of it's not just letting them decide on things. So government actually provided, during the past administration, Trump administration, medyo pangit yung Trump administration, but one of the things that they did well was they launched what they call I don't know if you know this, the Operation Warp Speed. Basically, they incentivize, will give money, funding to the biotech firms, produce, magunahan kayo, race to get the first vaccine out. And BioNTech and Moderna responded well. Yung iba rin, they tried, pero their vaccines failed. So, yun. So that's a good example of maybe the private sector was doing something limited, but pointed in the right direction. Government providing the right incentives, interference can lead to good things. They can leverage, or they can sort of convince the private sector to walk in the right direction. So we don't want to reverse capitalism. We want it to be a force for good. But government needs to make sure there are minimal abuses. And government also wants to make sure that, it can respond to very important societal needs. So for example, socialized housing in the Philippines, no? Um, it, many private sector companies are engaged there, no? But government in the past, no, they provided the incentives, no? If you're gonna build low cost housing, you get this much tax exemption, etc., etc. So that's an example of the private sector can be a force for good. Not all the time. Government can engage with them with the right mix of incentives or control or regulation so that they can really be a force for good instead of these abuses. And the last is the Marxist paradigm. You've probably covered this already in your basic economics class, but here, the Marxist theory was the Rostow stages doesn't end with high mass consumption. Eventually, the economies crash. People get tired. There are class revolts kasi nga the workers feel they are just exploited by the capitalists. Dissatisfaction turns into preference for socialism. And what is socialism, sir? That's in the next slide. Para hindi, they will turn their backs on pure capitalism. Gusto nila socialism, where it's more egalitarian, equal, etc. etc. So those are the two extreme paradigms. No? So we've reviewed the four things. No, in your basic in your development economics, you've probably studied more or covered more development theories. But for me, I just wanted these four things. No, and there's a purpose. No, mamaya kasi we'll go back to investment and manufacturing. But for now, let's just have a spectrum. No, this is not complete. No, but these are the basic ones. No? A spectrum of, kasi sasabihin niyo, so sir, what would be a good model? No? What would be a good economic, political framework that countries can adopt? We don't want, obviously, the two extremes. We don't want anarchy kasi that's the wild, wild west. No? Parang to each his own, bahala na. There's absence of authority. But of course, in some places, no, it's like the wild, wild west. No? There are certain pockets in Africa, for example, especially sub-Saharan Africa. It's less government control, no? Absence of authority. We don't want that. No? And the other extreme, no, we also don't like communism because communism, no more freedom yan. Government, you don't own anything. Government dictates what a person needs, no? And what job you will have. You don't want that. And usually, that happens in bloody revolutions, so like Cuba, North Korea, China previously. No? But China and even Vietnam, they're no longer communist. They might call themselves Communist Party, the ruling party is communist, but no, they're more socialist actually. So let's look at the ones in the middle. No? Again, this is the neoclassical. No? The market is king. Very, very, very minimal government regulations. No or limited social programs. So market is king. No? Let the market determine what people will get or what's out there. And then, somewhere in the middle, that's your run-of-the-mill typical capitalist democracy, which is your average. No? Both capitalistic, democratic, no, but there are better regulations than this. No? There are government regulations. No? For the most part, there are social programs. Here, socialism naman, no, and I'll discuss this last. Socialism naman, it's better than communism in the sense that there's still freedom, no, private property is allowed, no, except factors of production like mga electricity, mga inputs, etc., etc. And there is still democracy. Kasi what we don't want is the erosion of democracy. Kasi democracy, freedom, di ba? That's what we want, the capabilities approach. No? People want to determine their destiny. But for me, if you were to ask me, no, the most optimal would be social democracy. Yes, it's number one, people still have freedoms. Still democratic, no? It's still capitalistic, no? It's still within moving within a capitalistic framework, no? But you have effective, powerful government regulations. And you have a lot of social programs to address inequality. So free healthcare, free education, good quality, no? Good infrastructure, etc., etc. The Nordic countries are the prime examples of this. The northern Western European countries, mga Nordics yan. High taxes, no, but people, they're okay. Well, and you expect the Gini coefficients to be quite low, no, in these social democratic states. So to summarize, no, and a lot of Jesuits subscribe to this, no, to this paradigm, no. It's basically the central pillar here, the central goal is social justice, no? But it's not determined by government. No? It's still within that democratic capitalistic framework. But you have a lot of social programs so that, going back to our topic on equalizing opportunities and capabilities approach, no, you ensure that people have a better chance in life so that they can participate more and be more competitive in that democratic capitalistic framework. So better and more accessible, good quality education, healthcare, food, uh, unemployment insurance, safety nets, etc., mga SSS, etc. We have bits and pieces, no, pero it's still lacking, no, the Philippines. So we're not here. The good models again are the Nordic countries. So it's really focused on social justice, equalizing opportunities, a lot of social welfare provisions, especially for the poorer families. Subsidized housing maybe, higher minimum wages. So those things. No? Of course, may trade-offs. No? Usually, the taxes are much, much higher. But people are generally happy. So ito, I think this is optimal because people and businesses are still free, no? Pero there's government control and there's adequate social programs that can eventually equalize opportunities for people. So this is something for your consideration. And for me, speaking of development theories and paradigms, for me, this is the most optimal one. This is just an introduction to the concept. If you're really interested, I provided some links on Canvas, some videos, no, and there's actually I'm not sure how pure they are now. No, there's a group in the Philippines called PDSP or Partido Socialista Democrático ng Pilipinas. So it's advocating for more of these social programs, no? But still within this capitalistic democratic paradigm. PDSP. By the way, I'm not promoting Bert Gonzales. No? He will not win anyway. I'm not voting for him. Actually, one of the candidates, his party is the PDSP, presidential candidate, si Bert Gonzales. No? But his record is mixed because he used to be the defense secretary or intelligence secretary at one point, no, during the GMA administration. But yeah, you can learn more, no? If you Google social democracy, PDSP, they would have materials. So it's not socialism. Again, we still want people to be free. It's definitely not communism. It's still the basic premise is social justice, but don't forget people's and businesses' freedoms. If you want more information, again, all of these are on Canvas. Again, my synchronous sessions are just meant to summarize things that you should already be learning or will be learning if you haven't covered this yet on Canvas. Again, stop me at any point if you have questions. Okay. This is something, I didn't really teach this before, no? But this is one of the things that I deal with on almost a daily basis, no, at work. No? Because part of what we do at USAID is we try to help the Philippines, no, government and different stakeholders, no, try to be more competitive, no, and attract more investment. And the reason why I wanted to do a good review of Rosto, Harold, and Dumar, no, and the different economic political paradigms is this, no, is preparation for this topic. So, and I hope you find this interesting. Competitiveness and investment attractiveness. Well, before that, again, remember the lessons from Rosto, Hard, and Dumar. Focus on investment, diversify investment, also focus on people because they can. It's useless if you have advanced technology, but you don't have the right people for it. And you can also tap foreign investment to augment your economic activity, which is what a lot of developing countries are trying to attract. So what is competitiveness? Okay. So you guys are probably familiar with the World Economic Forum. No? It's basically summarized into this. No? It's the vital, and I'm copying, I'm lifting from the video, no, that I posted on Canvas. It's really the vital elements that make a country productive. If you improve competitiveness and increase productivity, then you'll have more opportunities for all to improve the way people live. So again, it boils down to productivity, which generates jobs, employment, higher quality of life. So it's what would make a country productive. World Economic Forum, and let me try to summarize this, no, the 12 pillars here. No. So for the World Economic Forum, and just like the United Nations, so just like UNDP, which comes up with an annual ranking and score, no, of HDI, no, the World Economic Forum, they actually have this annual report, no, where they rank the countries in terms of their scores. No? And there are 12 pillars. No? So it's not just 12 indicators. There are 12 buckets, 12 pillars, and over 100 indicators. No? I included links on the Canvas page, no? In terms of what do you call this, the indicators. No? Because for each country, they do have like a very detailed report. No? So let's start with infrastructure. Again, di ba? Going back to Rosto, infrastructure is an important thing, no? Again, these are the elements that make a country productive. No? That when you say productive, you can produce more, no? And have more economic activity. If your infrastructure is weak, no proper transport, no, you can't get the goods to the market or expensive. No? If electricity is expensive and spotty, no, factories can't produce things, no, or it's too expensive to produce things. If electricity is expensive, no? If internet is not there, useless. Macroeconomic environment, if interest rates are bad, no, the country is high in debt, no, that's not conducive for investment, no. There are low savings rate, credit rating is bad. We'll cover that in module 4, no? Fiscal indicators, no? We're deep in debt. Then investors will shy away. Kasi pangit yung enabling environment, no? What we call the enabling environment. Human capital, health, and primary education and higher education. So these two elements are the human capital elements of competitiveness. Uh, if people are not educated well, are not healthy, then you'd expect less productivity. No? People cannot participate well in the economy. No? If you don't have skills development, same thing. No? Goods market, no. Basically, it's the intensity of competition. So if you only have like ito, this is true for telecoms. Before Dito came out, no? And even up to now, no, there's still a virtual duopoly in the telecom sector. No? So telecom internet service is bad, it's expensive, no? Pharmaceutical drugs are expensive. What else? Good examples. Uh, Shipping is another big one. No? There's some competition concerns, no, in the Philippines, so it's bad as well. So it's all about competition. No? Is it easy? No? And we'll get to that later, no, competition aspects. Labor market efficiency, no? How rigid are employment rules, no? How's the minimum wage? Are businesses able to get the right people, no? Or masyado bang impossible or expensive, quote unquote, yung minimum wage, etc. Financial markets, no? It's basically the banking system, no? If I need to borrow loans, can I access that? No. How robust is it? Ganon. Those things. ICT, obviously, especially during the pandemic. No? It's very important. No? ICT use, to what extent is the country leveraging or maximizing technology? It affects. No? Kaya nga, kanina, di ba yung the Harold and Dumar was, if you sort of introduce more advanced technology, then you would expect greater economic activity and productivity. Market size, no? A lot of investors want the Philippines, both domestic and foreign, kasi yes, we're consumption driven, but that's more than 100 million people, no, as your potential market, no? Especially if 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 your product or service is for, general use. Business sophistication, no? Do you have the right management people in the country, corporate uh, offices, etc., etc. How advanced are the businesses in terms of processes, or rudimentary ba siya? And innovation. And innovation is tied to these things, no? Are people inventing new things, or are they just copying things? Dito, as you see later on, medyo mababa tayo dyan. And then institutions. Institutions, it's basically government, mostly government. Is there a lot of corruption? No? Is the judiciary fair? Do businesses get a fair shake? Is it easy for a business to open shop? Or is government going to be hampering them? Etc., etc. So, yeah. These are the 12 things I urge you. I recommend that you explore further, no? The 12 pillars, and then you have very detailed indicators for each. So for the next 20 minutes or so, 15 minutes, before that, no, because I'll be talking about investment barriers. No? But before that, let's take a look lang. First, how have we performed as a country before? As you would expect, no? The higher the number, the better. No? So focus on the red ones and the amber or orange ones. Sorry, I'm not really good with weird colors, no? Or non-standard colors. So, as you would expect, no? Institutions or government has improved, pero still a bit below the bottom half. Infrastructure, it's been perennially bad. That's a main complaint. And we'll get to that later. Uh, Macro environment, especially during the Pinoy administration up to now, no, it has been great. No? Your macro fundamentals. So you keep hearing this in the news. No? The macro fundamentals are good. Yes, fiscal deficit is okay. Employment figures are okay. Deficits are okay. Exchange rates are okay, etc., etc. ICT adoption, it's improving gradually, pero it's still not at par with the other countries. Innovation is also another problem. Magaling tayo kumopya, but not necessarily invent things, kulang sa patents. No? But again, that's a function of, again, the education, basic and higher education. Health, obviously, and this was very glaring during the pandemic. So all of these 12 elements are good determinants of productivity, and we've been faring bad in some, not all. We've actually been good in terms of market size. Obviously, we're a big country. Magandang market. It's a big market. If you succeed, if people buy it, that's a potential 100 plus million Filipinos buying your products. So for the next few minutes, the next 15 minutes or so, or 20 minutes, we'll talk about investment barriers as a function of this also. Kasi nga, again, the development theory is we want to emphasize investment. But the problem is what the country is facing barriers, no, in terms of investment. And when I say investment, it means both domestic and foreign, and just doesn't mean foreign lang. Again, going back to this, infrastructure has been a major source of concern for investors. High transport and logistics costs, no? There are figures out there. It's funny, no? Not funny, but it's strange that they did a study before, no? Shipping from, I think it's New Orleans or somewhere south of the US to Manila is cheaper than shipping from Davao to Manila. There are competition concerns kasi there's lack of competition in the shipping industry here. No? But yun nga, it's very expensive. No? Logistics in the Philippines, shipping, also because of our archipelagic nature, no? it is challenging. Poor connectivity in terms of internet and physical, no, road connectivity, at least in the past few years, no, medyo nag-improve with the Skyway, public transport is improving, will be improving in the next few years as well. And then expensive power costs. We are number 2 in Asia, just next to Japan. Especially, for example, if you want to engage in data centers, in factories, obviously you'll use up a lot of energy. That's expensive. So that can be a deterrent for investment. And, again, it's also the supply side, no? The builders, no, or the builders of infrastructure are weak. No? DPWH, DOTR, not just this administration, but even before, no, traditionally, they haven't been effective and efficient in carrying out, especially the large ones, no? The skyways, the expressways, the railways, etc. They've been weak, no, since the past. No? Capacity constraints. Kami nga sa USA, to be honest with you guys, no? We actually have been, for the longest time, supporting offices of DPWH and DOTR. Because sometimes mahina, no? Just designing, engineering designs, feasibility studies, etc. kulang. Another is the high barriers to entry and other restrictive regulatory measures. And we'll get to the regulatory measures later. Again, barriers to entry lang naman is equated with competition. Based on the World Bank's studies, no, our industries are less competitive than we want. Kasi again, as you know, no, as you've learned in basic economics or in your management courses, the more competition, the better. No? The more competition, you would expect lower prices, better service, etc. No? But they found out there are some regulations, no, that sort of prevent, no, additional market players to enter. No? So for example, in telecom for the longest time, because you need the congressional franchise, you need a lot of paperwork, that sort of disincentivizes additional investment. Yeah. And the World Economic Forum, no, same finding. No, we are at the bottom 20 for market competition. No? A lot of in many sectors, no, there's a PID study here. No, most sectors in the Philippines do not have adequate competition. That's why a lot of factors of production are expensive. No? And companies that want to enter the market, so to speak, no, find it hard kasi nga ang daming regulations. So I want to invest, pero it's hard to invest, then that becomes a wall, no, or a bottleneck or a barrier instead of being facilitative. Another very important thing, no, and this is, I don't know if you're following the news lately, no. This is one of the important barriers to investment. It's barriers to foreign investment. The Philippines ranks the third most restrictive in the world, no? Out of I think 84, no? Maximum kasi of 40% in most sectors. Some sectors like mass media, absolutely no foreign investment. Pero other sectors, mostly 40%. Pero kung foreigner ako kasi, like ikaw, you're setting up your business. So for the most part, especially when you start, you want to own the business. No? Holy. Pero ito, it's forcing foreigners to partner with locals. No? So that has become a deterrent. No? You ask the foreign chambers, no, the foreign companies, that has been a disincentive for them to actually set up shop here. And that's why we've gotten a very, very low, poor ranking compared us to Singapore. So very restrictive. Construction is restrictive. Telecoms is restrictive. Ito. They have sectoral scores as well, or rankings. Yeah, again, same thing, no? It's in the news, no, since last year, no? Very, very restrictive. China and Vietnam are 1 and 2. Tayo, second to the last among the 14 Asia Pacific countries. So yun nga, it's really bad. No? Poor infra, as we discussed earlier, FDI restrictiveness is also another problem. Now I ask you guys, why is foreign investment good? Is it good, or am I just biased for foreign companies, towards foreign companies? Why is foreign investment good? Or maybe you might want to answer, why is it bad? Maybe you don't agree. What do you guys think? Why is foreign investment good? BRICS and then Francis. Go ahead.
Mainly because of the possibility of spillover, sir.
That's one. That's very good. Okay. Sige, Francis.
So the possibility of economic growth, especially in areas where foreigners set up shop. Like, for example, when the foreigners build a factory or an economic a factory or an office on a specific place, many will be employed, and if many will be employed, it will spur economic progress.
Yeah. So just to combine your idea with BRICS is, yeah, especially if they set up shop in, let's say, a less developed region, it can create spillover effects. No? Because it will generate jobs, and then the surrounding areas will probably set up businesses, for example, to cater to ancillary businesses like restaurants, shops, etc., etc. So that's good. That's good. Any other thoughts? Feel free to disagree as well. Sophia, go ahead.
It will increase competition between domestic and foreign firms, sir.
Yes, and increasing competition is good. Anyone else? All right, Mark, sige, ikaw na muna last. Then let's
Sir,
proceed.
I just
Go
want to
ahead.
share this. I remember I reading an article about uh Western companies who boycotted China. So their factories, they withdrew their factories from China and they transferred to like Taiwan or Vietnam or the surrounding countries. And then uh parang it it parang naging yung nga nagkaroon ng economic growth because of hiring more people, especially in the rural area. So nagkaroon ng parang more jobs essentially.
Great, exactly. No, and you know, you raised a good point, no? And I have an additional point here, no? Yun na nga, no? So sometimes foreign companies are looking where to invest, no? Kunyari, oh, I want to invest in Asia kasi okay daw doon. But we are in Asia, no? And you know, sometimes dahil ayaw na nila sa China, they pull out. The next question is where will they go, no? The problem here is the Philippines wants them to locate here. Pero again, again, we have a lot of barriers, no? Kaya more often than not, because of these things and other things I will talk about after this, they go to Vietnam or they go to another place. Yun nga, kaya nga, yun nga, again, we are not competitive kasi investors, for example, are looking at the pillars of the elements that will support me when I do business. So yun, that's a good point. So just to wrap up, the things you've said are excellent, really good. Increased competition. No? Someone mentioned this already. No? I think it was Sophia. No? Increasing competition is good. It keeps people on their toes. No? Tingnan nyo, di ba? When Dito started out, no, the third telecom, bigla na lang Globe and Smart, they came out again with only this, only that, better service, started building more towers. Parang nayanig, di ba? Parang, sige, I will shape up now. Di ba? Yung ganun, it provides pressure. So, for our benefit, di ba? So, yun. Increased economic activity, no? Especially in far-flung areas, for example, no? Or in the areas where they invest. No? So, prime example ito, no? And I will tie this with this one. The fifth one, no, dapat pala pinagdikit ko. Additional backward and forward linkage opportunities for domestic enterprises. These two things, no, the increased economy and this one. The prime example here, no, which is very familiar to most of you, the call center industry. You might have friends or family members who have worked or are still working in the BPO industry or call centers, no, which is just part of that entire ecosystem. For example, the BGC and whatnot, no, they've increased economic activity in certain regions, no, and it's not only that. They have produced direct jobs, generated direct jobs, pero as a result, they've also created indirect jobs. No? May multiplier effect, indirect businesses, what we call ancillary businesses. No? So backward linkages lang naman is the suppliers to a business. No? The forward linkage is when I want to sell mga distribution channels. No? So the call center industry, I need to set up shop. Kailangan ko na ngayon ng magsusupply sa akin ng furniture, ng hardware, ng computers, ng food for my etc. etc. I need security guards, no. So that created other industries as well. No, it created a whole host of supply services, no, janitorial services, office management, real estate services, etc. etc. So hindi lang yung industry by itself, but it can have spillover effects, as someone mentioned earlier. No? And then forward linkage, no? Ito, ano ba? Ito, for example, IKEA, no? IKEA is one of my examples sa canvas, no? IKEA, for example, no? You don't expect IKEA Sweden, no, to import everything from Sweden. Hindi pwede yun kasi it's too expensive. No? So they will have to get their supplies from local suppliers. So that creates opportunities for suppliers. No? And then dahil may delivery sila, for example, no, it will also create better businesses for delivery services, no, trucking, mga Grab, etc. Because may forward naman. If you think about it sa supply chain or value chain, from supply, from the input to the product to getting it to market. Getting it to market is forward. Uh, the inputs that you need, the supplies, yan naman yung backward linkages. You're MECO student, so you've probably studied this in management already, yung backward forward linkages. So yun, very, very good kasi it doesn't stop with that sole or standalone business. Maraming spillover effects and it create other industries. And another good thing is if we don't have the technology, the cutting edge sophistication, they can. And prime example again is Korea. No? I always will learn from the Korean model kasi yun, they welcome foreign investment and they learn. No? Dati hindi naman high-tech ang Korea. Now, because the advanced technologies set up shop there, no? Tapos they've improved the quality of education. Now the scientists are able to understand the sophisticated technology. Ayun, they themselves are now producing high-tech stuff. And another important thing is additional money. No? So, for example, no, the likes of Ramon Ang or other players in the construction industry, airports, no, they need tons of money. No? And sometimes they would welcome partnerships with foreigners. Kasi nga, the Bulacan Airport, for example, that will cost billions, if not trillions of money. So they would welcome that. So it's not bad. No? It's actually good. Foreign investment is usually good. Pero you might say, sir, hindi ba magsasara? No, on the contrary, hindi foreign investments will not necessarily lead to closure of local businesses. No? Yun nga, it can lead to opportunities. And mind you, government, again, ito na nga yun, no? It's not just laissez-faire, no? But government can actually set the rules. If you're interested, the government just recently amended the Retail Trade Liberalization Act. Kasi dati, to protect the local retailers, no, mga SM, Rustans, etc., for a foreigner, a foreign retail company cannot set up shop here if their capitalization is less than $2.5 million. So dapat malalaki talaga. So they just lowered it. It's now enacted into law last December, no? 500,000 na lang. It wasn't totally abolished, no? Kasi if you abolish it, baka mamaya they will overrun the mom and pop stores. Kumbaga they relaxed it pero still protecting the smaller players. So government can provide safeguards and safety nets para hindi ma-prevent yung foreign investment totally destroying the local industry. So again, that's the interplay of capitalism plus government control. No? So hindi pwedeng sige lang, laissez-faire. You can have controls also. So if you still don't listen to the fear-mongering extreme left groups no na, foreigners get out. No, because of these things, there are benefits. But I'm not saying na puro foreign lang. Of course, to the extent that, domestic investments are created, of course, you should support that. Third is, and this is, we will stop at the fourth one. So the third is regulatory quality. No? The Philippines is really notorious for red tape. Some businesses, no, instead of wanting to, they want to invest in the Philippines, whether foreign or local. Sometimes ang hirap because gusto na nga nila mag-set up shop and the paperwork, the bureaucracy, the red tape, the permits that they need, etc., it takes forever. So some of them parang wag na lang. No? So, you go to the local government. I've worked with local governments, no, before yung mga iba. It will take months before or even a year before the permit to construct something is granted. So talagang red tape. We are second to the worst, no, in terms of the number of procedures to start a business. No? I no longer required it in this class, no, pero there's this report again, no, by the World Bank called Doing Business. There are 10 indicators, 10 pillars of how difficult or how easy it is to do business. And most of it is red tape and bureaucracy. Again, customs also, no, just getting goods in, sama din, no. Bottom half, logistics is bad as well. And until recently, before the CREATE law, no, our tax rates were not competitive with our neighbors. So at least ngayon, medyo bumaba. So lots of this. And again, yun nga, di ba? Parang as I forgot who said it, si Mark yata, no? Many are pulling out of, let's say, China. Philippines has a hard time attracting them because of these things. And the last one is government. Again, government. Sometimes government, when you deal with them, medyo hirap, weak capacity, and of course, the elephant in the room since before is corruption. Regulatory capture lang, parang there are vested interests, yung oligarchic nature sometimes of businesses, no? Especially the powerful business, the conglomerates, no? In cahoots with the lawmakers and the powers that be. But again, corruption, which is tied to corruption. So that's also an investment barrier. Kasi if I'm an investor, I don't want to invest kasi baka mamaya government will just milk my company dry, always ask for bribes, grease money, etc., etc. So yun. I hope you guys found this interesting, no? Kasi it's more applied, no, than theoretical. No? And again, going back to the important point, no, for economic growth to be more rapid, no, it's really recommended that countries focus on investment. But the problem is sometimes there are apparent investment barriers. So we need to address them. So as you've been seeing, no, I always like providing indicators and then analyzing indicators, kind of like what you're doing with CBMS. No? So I would urge you, if you ever, in the future in your careers, no, be evidence-based. No? Consult indicators to find out exactly what's wrong, what's happening, and then you can they call this design interventions, no, as a result. That's why I keep providing you guys, sorry if it's too much information, providing you with a lot of these indicators kasi again, we're doctors, no? We're wearing hats as doctors. We want to diagnose things more comprehensively and more specific so we can address the different pain points. For example, investment. Okay, any questions before we wrap up?
Sir, I'd like to clarify for the dyad assignment po. Do we submit as isa lang kami or do we both?
Just one. Sorry. Just choose.
Alright.
Kasi it becomes confusing if
Sige.
all of you will submit. Just choose one to submit.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Some people left. Gutom na yata. And I think most of you gutom na. All right. So if there are no further questions, let's call it a day or a night. Thank you guys for joining me. Sorry if it's too much information. I hope you found at least some parts interesting. Next week, we'll discuss the more alternative and integrative, more modern paradigms, especially the donut economics pieces, and I think we'll cover the social solidarity economy paradigm as well. If you have time, we'll also cover participatory development. So keep covering your Canvas material. No, there's more material there, etc., etc. Okay. Have a good evening. Have a good dinner, guys. Okay. See you next week.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Have a great
Thank you,
day.
sir.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.